Are you looking for a podcast where you can hear from real people regarding their real dental drama? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join hosts Bethany Petty and Dr. Rena Kuba as we dive into the solutions we've created and the mistakes we've made while managing dental drama. Let's get started. Hello, how are you?
I was good until you told me what we were talking about today. I was just fine.
So my secret, not so secret mission on this is every year, I think almost every year, I've sent you some very deep and thought-provoking questions, and I've asked you to do this homework, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you've ever done it.
I usually do part of it.
Okay, well,
like
that's good.
I'll answer the couple that I can. And then the rest, I'm like, why don't you tell me what the answer is?
That's what it is.
Why don't you tell me what I want out of life? Why don't you tell me what my goals are for next year? So this podcast is basically going to be very short. We're going to be here for like 6 minutes.
Oh my goodness. So I call this the annual retreat questions. And
retreat, making it sound so pleasant.
I think it makes it sound really pleasant.
You do? It does. Until, even when you said that to me, I was like, oh.
Then you start
Damn.
reading the questions and you're like, she tricked me.
Yes, I could tell by the look on your face that I was not understanding it right. Because you were waiting for my face to do what you knew it was going to do. And I was still going, oh, retreat.
It does.
Where are we going? What are we doing?
Good. I should have just made you book a hotel somewhere fun and then sent you the questions and said, this is why you're at the hotel. But I didn't do that. I trusted that you would just...
Thinking of retreat, somebody's going to be rubbing my feet. Sure, I'll take coconut and jasmine. Throw in some lavender, too.
So I guess before we get into these then, the encouragement to all listeners would be not to skip these questions, but to find a place where you're willing to slow your mind down to answer these questions. Whether that's rubbing your feet somewhere or a beach or whatever.
So it's funny because, I don't know, we did that podcast a couple of weeks ago about the be your authentic self.
Yes.
And so you and I talked about my associate listening to it, and yes. Because he's young and upcoming and, kind of like right now he didn't really have a choice because he has to follow the culture of the offices that he's in.
Right.
And so I encouraged him to listen to it, and he was like, why did I listen to that? Like, what was the point? And I'm like, I probably would have said the same thing back then. Like, what do you mean? I am my authentic self. Like, I'm here to drill, fill, and bill. Like, what else do you want?
There?
Yeah. And so, so I started asking him some, like, well, what would you do? Right now I've set the tone for here and you have to follow it, but what would you do if not? And he's like, well, I mean, I just do it. I just do what I'm thinking and doing, like, but I don't sit here and think, oh, shucks, let me think about what I want to do. And I'm like, that's how I feel in these retreat questions. I'm like, what do you mean I got to think about it? I just do it.
I think you need to think about it.
Okay. But that's why I pay you, for you to think about it.
Well, and there's a reason. So I love all of my clients, and one of the things that I feel like has changed over the years, these annual retreat questions, I don't think I've probably had them for maybe the last 4 or 5 years. So it's become a recent thing, and I've been consulting for whatever 14 or 15 years, right? So this has come about, I would say, more recently, because the more I've sat with clients, the more I've realized there's either personal dissatisfaction, there's work dissatisfaction, I thought I was going to be somewhere different, mentally, emotionally. I thought the practice was going to be somewhere different. And there's almost this moment of like, how did I get here? Like, why is this not what I wanted it to be? And so I realized that if we'll slow down annually, which is why we're doing this now, is, we're nearing the end of the year. I think the end of the year is a naturally good time for reflection and thinking back and all of that. And if we could just take a few of these questions and think on them deeply and allow that to inform us for next year, then we just make better decisions towards what we want. I think sometimes we just get in the mode of just go, go, go. don't think about anything. Just drill, fill, and bill. Like you said, just keep going. And then at some point we hit this wall where we're like, do we even like what we're doing anymore? And my goal is to prevent people from getting to that point. Or if they hit that point, they're like, oh, come on, you've thought through this. You know what you're doing. You know what you want in life. And so this is why I love these questions. I actually do these on an annual basis for myself as well. So I don't just preach it. I also live by it. And I won't be able to ask all of them, but I think I want to ask you live.
I'm sure you'll be able to ask all of them because all of mine will be like a second long.
You're just going to be looking at me. What do you say, Bethany?
Yeah. What do I want? Am I happy?
Oh, Lord, I hope not. If so, if Dr. Kuba chooses to answer in that way in this podcast, listeners, at least note down the questions and ask them of yourself.
I'll try, y'all. I will try, but let's go then.
Okay, so I am going to jump straight down to a section called work satisfaction. And I feel like we've kind of danced around this topic a few times, but we've not necessarily dug into these particular questions with you. So I'm going to ask you some questions on work satisfaction, and we'll see what you say. And for those of you listening, I would highly recommend either writing these questions down. I'll try to remember to put them in the notes as well and answer these for yourself. So question number 1, which I know you've looked at this document so many times. You probably have this memorized. You've probably thought thoroughly on this for the last 3 or 4 years. But nonetheless, we're going to bring it back up again. So name the things that you are most proud of with work this year.
I'm proud of, and of course I'm saying this now, I hope I'm still saying it in about 3 months from now, but I'm proud that I finally reached my decade-long goal of dropping Delta Dental.
Woo woo!
I am proud, I think you told me that when we dropped MetLife last year, that we have retained a good number. We've retained more than half of those patients.
Retained, at the last time I pulled the numbers, you have retained all of them. Well, it may not be the exact patients, but you've kept the same MetLife number of patients,
okay, so
which is remarkable.
That I like, and that's given me some confidence maybe going forward, although I'm petrified of what the next month is going to bring, the next 2 or 3 months are going to bring, in terms of dropping Delta, who's sticking around, you know, how many bad reviews am I getting, how many board complaints am I getting, all from a financial perspective. Like, all of that is looming in the back of my mind. But I keep reminding myself, okay, take a breath, like, just don't overthink it and don't panic just yet.
And you're doing it. That's what's important. I mean, it was a goal, and you're doing it.
It's too late now, and so keep going. I am. What was the question? What am I proud of this year?
Name the things that you're most proud of with work this year.
I think. I mean, we're still here. You know, with all the drama that's gone on between a missing sensor and the staffing issues and all of that. And we're still here. Like, I don't think patients have picked up on any of that.
Right.
I guess the team members that I have that I love are still there. The associate hasn't left yet. He still comes to work. Yeah.
I think those are good. And it hits on a lot of different things. Strategic business decisions that you've made, like dropping Delta, you know, functioning well without being in network with MetLife, team members, associates staying, like, those are all things to be proud of. Because, again, it's not that happened by happenstance. Like, there's a lot of conversations that took place to retain good people, a lot of culture and things that you've had to work hard to retain people. So I think that's a good thing to be proud of. Okay, name the things that you wish you could have done better.
I mean, I always feel like everything could be better, honestly. I think, what could be better? I think maybe if I was a little more in tune to some drama things. I don't know. Like, maybe that's one of our key players that we did not retain, that left at the end of the summer. I was gone quite a bit in the summer, so could I have caught wind of her dissatisfaction sooner? Could I have caught wind of the sensor sooner if I was paying attention more? I don't know, what could I have done? What do you think from your viewpoint? What do you think I could do better? I mean, I'm sure there's things we could have done better.
Well, I think that it may go along with what you're saying right now, but we really just, because of two new team members, grasped some culture issues that had gone awry that I don't think you and I think we've both been surprised at some of the feedback that we've gotten from our newer team members. And so
just to clue in the people listening, like about a week or so ago, I was out of town. You were in the office and talking to some of the new team members. And I think that was like both of their like 1 month mark and 5 week mark, something like that. So it was good timing. And one of them shared with you that the culture was so negative, and I've always prided myself on a good culture. And I think then I had to stop and go, oh crap, like how did I miss that? And I think for me it was just kind of going, oh, this person's probably having a bad day, oh, that person's probably having a bad week, and not really taking ownership of, no, it's an office-wide problem. And I've been burying my head in the sand with it, and embarrassed by it, disappointed by it, scared of it, like how do I fix this now? So but I think maybe being a little more in tune that I thought we were.
Yeah, well, and I think you and I, even me coming away from it last week, trying to figure out how did it get off? You know, how did that slip away? Because even as I was talking with these ladies as they were being brought on board, you know, I do a lot of culture talk. This is who we are as a practice and as a team and blah, blah, blah. And then that embarrassment of kind of like, oh gosh, like the culture that I said we are, they're not experiencing that. And how did that happen? How do we get off on that? So I do think when I think about things that could have gone better with your practice, I rope myself into that and go, wow, Bethany, how did you miss that this culture was off?
Well, and of course the whole sensor missing thing again. I mean, that's a huge talk about embarrassing and all of that. But I think to me that's like, how did that happen in an office that we do spend so much time on compliance and following up, and there's open communication and there's all this, like, how the hell did that happen? So I think, there are still things, despite our best efforts, like, in a way defeating, because I'm like, I don't know what I could have done different. And, you know, I say that too, like, maybe it's just I wasn't around so much. I'm like, okay, so I've got to be here all the time.
Right.
That's not the answer. And I don't think that is the answer. I think, you know, I'm still working on figuring out how do we not miss these things.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, we've had, in your practice in particular, such a strong culture that has been that we haven't had to really think deeply about it or rope it into our systems. And so we focus so much on the technical application of dentistry and improving our skills and our verbiage and communication with the patients. And so we focus so heavily on the nuts and bolts of what it takes to run a successful practice that in that the culture slipped. And you and I did not realize it until this fresh perspective came on board. And we were able to, thankfully, we've got structures built in where I'm sitting with people on an individual basis. And so we were able to catch this, 4 weeks or 5 weeks into these two new people. Now, everybody else is probably just experiencing the culture as they know it. And so it's not standing out as odd to them. And then you put two new people
That's very true.
And you're like, oh, wow, well, there's a culture problem. And nobody has known it because they've just been living in it. And so now it's like, well, shoot, that somehow happened. And so how do we build that into the systems that we're focusing on?
Well, also the other thing that I kind of forgot about until right now is the other big culture thing we do at the end of the summer, we didn't do this year.
Yeah.
And so the summer is one where, it's like, everything else goes to the side. We're just trying to survive in a pedo office in the summer. It's such madness. And usually at the end of the summer, we come together and we, I have our big event, and then that I ended up canceling this year because of the censor.
Yeah.
And that probably has been a big...
You're right. I didn't think about that.
A big culture hit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I guess I don't regret it. I still don't think I could have had a party then given that, but maybe I should have thought of something smaller to replace it with.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a good point. it shows how maybe dependent the team is on those points in time. It's so habitual for them to stop and have fun and reflect, and we had to take that away for obvious reasons with the sensor, but that very well had an impact that we didn't even realize was going to happen. So, yeah. Okay, so two of the things that I won't have you dig into right here, but under name the things you wish you could have done better, I really like when you're sitting down and writing on this to rank the items in order of importance. So one thing, if we've got 4 or 5 things, which we just mentioned here, it's hard to focus in on all 5 of those at the same time. So by ranking them, we're able to pick the most important out of all of those, at least put them in an order. Like, okay, we need to focus on culture. We need to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Okay, well, what are the things that we need to do with that? Let's just focus on culture for a month or 2, and then let's move to the next thing that we want to improve. So the human brain works better at sequencing things out. So we won't necessarily do that here, but that's one of the things that I would encourage listeners to do. You started answering some of this, but more specifically, what were the hurdles that you faced this year?
Always staffing. It's always staffing. It's always, I think the summer was more stressful because of all the people that were out in the summer. And yeah, just being shorthanded, I guess. And then, the person that left at the end of the year or at the end of the summer, and then we had to fire the 3, and so it's just people. That's always the big. And I think I've talked about this before, but Scheduling Institute, has a training where they talk about like the big 5 things for any business, and it's like, the space and equipment, your marketing, your blah blah blah. I can never remember the 5, but one of them is the human capital, and I'm like, that has always been my point of hold up on the success of the business, and what we could do with the practice is always back down to staffing.
It is and I would say that's probably always been the case, but the feeling of that and the complications that have come with human capital post-pandemic have become exponentially harder. And so I do think what used to be a difficult challenge with managing people is 10 times harder now, for a variety of reasons. So can you think of any other hurdles that you faced this year? It pretty much all centers around
the people. Yeah.
The next section, which we won't get into just to protect your team, but it says name each of your coworkers or employees and list the following for each of them. In what ways have you served them? And in what ways do you feel like you failed them? And so by each person, so not necessarily thinking about it globally, because I was raised in a family of several kids. I'm raising kids now in a big family. And I've always realized that sometimes we think about the whole dynamic and we miss some of the small, what I would call the small pieces or the small players even. Like there's one kid of mine that really just doesn't give us any trouble, and I don't spend enough time thinking about her individually, how I'm serving her or how I'm failing her. Same thing can happen when we're managing people. If we think globally, we've done this really well for our team, and we've done this really well for, the associates and all that, but we don't think individually, we can accidentally miss over some people. So I really like in this section, as people go through this, to think about each person.
So can you give me an example? Because I think that's really tough. Like, that's tough to think and go, I have failed somebody.
Yep.
What do you mean?
So an example might be, let's take this person that left at the end of the summer that you and I keep referring to. Good critical team member that we had on our team. I think we can think for a very long time of the ways that we've served her. I personally have a history with her that goes back, that I was able to bring her into the dental field and kind of get her trained up before she even became a member of your team. I was training with her. And so I think, oh man, there's so much we can say about ways that we've served this particular individual. We've given her a career that she didn't have. She was in retail before, and there's only so far you can go in retail. And we've provided all this training. Like, think of all the trainings that she's been to, the trips that she got to take. Like, I remember the trip to Vegas that she got to go on. It was the first time ever that she had been to Vegas. It was so fun to watch her eyes just like light up with all this that she's seen the first time. And anyway, lots that we can say about serving her. How do we fail her? Something that has come up just recently with her, as she and I have continued to communicate just recently, is I didn't realize one of the only reasons that she left the practice was for financial advancement.
See, and again, you say that. I don't believe that. I know you know her far better than I do, but I do not believe that.
And that it may be what she's saying to herself. It may not necessarily be the full evaluation. But I look at that and go, is that a way that I failed her? How did I not gather that she was needing more income, or there was pressure on her financially to provide for her family, is what she said.
Okay, so I guess that's where, again, I'm being very defensive here. So I'm in my feelings now, but I'm like, but how did I fail you with that? I didn't tell you to take all these days off. I didn't tell you not to come in and work on Mondays. I didn't tell you, like, I gave you a paycheck. How did I fail you?
Yeah.
Like, what was I supposed to do about that? And then you didn't even come talk to me about, you just gave me a 2-week notice.
Yeah.
So to me, I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, I know I'm being very defensive here, and I'm needing to figure out how to improve, but I'm going person by person, and I'm like, I don't know that I've failed anybody in the practice. Am I just being like really obnoxious with this right now? Like,
you're like, this is probably where I stopped in the questions every time.
That's where the notebook shut and the pen cap came on.
And I don't think there's going to be a failure on every single person. Honestly, I think in most situations, you're going to look at most of your employees and you're going to be like, hey, I think I did this well. I think I did this well. I don't think you're going to have a failure on every single person. I think as people start diving into this, they're going to realize that they potentially made some mistakes with certain people. And I don't know that we made a mistake with that person. It was just another one of those moments similar to the culture thing. Like, oh my gosh, how did that happen? Oh my gosh, what do we need to do about it?
I'm just saying from the dentist standpoint, I'm trying to get you to pick on me right now because I'm sure there's a lot of listeners too that were like, dude, we give y'all the moon. We give you the effing moon right now. Like, we are paying you substantially more and getting substantially less than we've ever gotten in the history of our careers. You have a job. How did I fail you?
Yeah.
So I think this is going to be a hard one for most of us because there's only so much I can do to get you to realize, like...
Or potentially looking at people that display potential and you maybe haven't given them the opportunity to try new things or to grow. Maybe you're so like, I don't want to make any mistakes that I'm unwilling to kind of push this person into a new area. I'm unable to provide
I'm going to
training.
argue there too because I'm like, I'm scared of pushing you because you might push yourself on out the door in this climate. So, all right. School me on this one later then. Sorry, y'all. I'm sorry, Bethany.
I'm sure 80% of the listeners are like, amen, Kuba.
99% of the listeners.
We shall see. I'll take a poll after this.
Yes. Or if y'all have advice for me on how to get out of this crusty self because I am in it thick.
No, I think there has been a chasm that has grown for sure. Again, I hate to keep going pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, but it's two different worlds. It's like, what is it? BC, AD? Is that two different times? It's like BC and AD, like completely different time zones in my mind. And pre-pandemic, there was more of a symbiotic relationship between workers and employers. We needed them. They needed us. We mutually benefited one another. The practice could maintain really good profitability margins. It was for the most part, it was a happy land. And that got totally broken. And it is. I feel like there's so much more tension and this chasm that continues to grow between practice owners and their employees because there is this kind of root of bitterness that is just like, yes, I appreciate you. I couldn't live without you. But at the same time, you are costing me so much, not only financially, but emotionally and mentally. And
so, like, if you ask the question, what did I do for you, and how did you not serve me? I could totally answer that.
So I should
wouldn't have enough
reframe
paper
it.
in the world to answer that one.
So I should reframe
How
this.
did you fail me?
You go to your coworkers and ask them, how did you serve me this year?
Okay.
And how did you fail me? And all 99.9% of listeners are going to be like, yes. No, please don't do that. You will have people walk out. Retain your employees.
Do you want to keep going? Because I've
Yes.
clearly ruined this podcast now. You're like, abort. We won't do this again.
Abort the mission.
Yes.
No, because I'm going to force you to answer some of these, even though you don't like them. Okay, I'm going to ask you a couple more. This is obviously not exhaustive, but I'm going to ask you about your favorite category, which is goal setting. Don't look at me like this. If y'all could see the looks that I'm getting, it's just like
My arms are crossed.
You didn't know I was going to use this podcast to manipulate
Yes.
and force
Yes.
you to do things. Okay, so first and foremost, what are goals from last year that you maybe didn't get to complete that you are actually wanting to pursue this year? Because I think every year we have goals, and then as the year goes on, we either don't complete them or we move them off the list and we're like, that's no longer a goal of mine.
I think this is where I always get stuck. I'm like, Bethany, why don't you tell me what my goals are? So I think goals were, I don't even remember what they were from last year, to survive and still be in business, honestly. And so I think, again, the Delta Dental, I mean, we met that goal. I guess the goal for next year would be, are we still going to be in business after dropping Delta Dental? And I'm laughing when I'm saying that, but I'm kind of being serious. I don't know what's going to happen with my practice in the next couple of months. And so I'm hoping we're still in business. I think a goal would also be, you can't help it. You compare where you were in collections and production last year. And I don't think we are, I think we're either at where we were last year or we are less than. So that was a goal that was not met.
Yeah.
And so the goal for next year would be just like even a little bit more would be good. And I think, there's a point when we started working together, I had like really big growth for a couple of years and you were like, that's not sustainable. That's not going to happen. And you were like, growth of what, 2% or something is norm?
Usually
is that
2
still
to
norm,
5%.
by the way? Is that still the norm? Okay.
Sustainable growth. What I call sustainable growth is usually between 3 and 5% is really...
So then I would say we probably have not done that this year.
You have not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then that's a goal not met.
Yeah.
And I would hope to meet that goal next year.
Yeah.
I guess another goal would be try to retain as many as I can.
Which honestly we did.
I think
up
we
until we had to
did.
terminate people.
Yeah.
We retained really well this year. I feel like every year we're like, we're happy with the team that we have. We're moving into the year with the goal of retention. There's nobody on our chopping block. And honestly, we did retain well this year.
And I always get nervous around the 5-year anniversary mark for somebody because I've had several that there was one that I could think of that hit it, and then shortly thereafter we had to part ways. And then there were 2 that were like right there. We were a few months shy of their 5-year, and then they resigned, and that was tough for me. I think in the office wise, it was fine. Just emotionally, it was tough for me emotionally because I didn't see it coming, and I didn't like whatever. These were my babies. I had kind of like grown to rely on them.
Yeah.
And so I think we just had one that hit a 5-year, and I don't know what she's thinking. She's made some comments here or there, and so I don't know. And then we've got 2 that are coming up on, they would be 3 that are coming up on 10-year next year, I think.
Yeah.
We've only had one person hit the 10-year in the past before.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a goal for me. I would really love if all 3 were still there, but I guess I will take as many as will stay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think there's something challenging about those big anniversaries. Just like you start worrying about them, they start thinking, is this where I want to be? Is this my long-term plan? What other dreams do I have? And so those anniversary years are more important than we really think. From an employee standpoint, those are evaluation periods of time. And so I think a good goal would be to retain all three of those long-termers for sure. Yeah. Are there any goals, or let's see, let me read the question here. What are the new goals that you want for your family this year? So I think, and this is interesting because to me, these often go together when we are talking about like, what do you want out of the practice and all of that. These are always married in your mind. Like the freedom that you need for your family and to be able to take care of your parents and to have the ability to, travel for career type things and also just be able to take time off. Like that has been critical to your goals in the practice as well. So I think it's going to be hard for you to separate the two because they're always one in your mind. But I would say a lot of people are single tracked mind. It's like these are my goals for the practice, and I could say, potentially articulate those pretty clearly. And then over here, almost independent from or separate from, these are my family goals. And hopefully they mutually benefit each other. And so part of this questioning is those, in my mind, those should be more closely married. That the goals that we have for our family, the practice should be able to provide that. And vice versa, the goals that we have for our family should be able to support the goals of the practice. So we just talked about goals for your practice, like we want to get back to that sustainable growth level. We want to be able to retain a lot of the Delta patients with this change, going into this new year. We want to retain our long timers and ideally just retain in general all the team members that we have. So then, and last year your goal was actually retaining the associate. We talked a lot about that towards the end of last year, and then here we are, and thankfully, knock on wood, that seems to be good. So then, if you were to try to segment it out, what are the goals that you have just for your family?
I mean, I think you just kind of said it already. I want to make sure that I think, my husband and I, we always have a little bit of back and forth over, he doesn't like the kids to miss school. I don't particularly care. And so I don't like taking vacations when places are slammed in the summer. I'd rather say, well, can't we just go in September? And he's like, but they're in school in September. I'm like, they're doing nothing in September.
Yeah.
And so that's my opinion anyway. So I think for me, I have now, there are already, I think, 2 vacations we're planning for next year already that I am going to miss some time in the office at critical times.
Yeah.
And I'm already getting nervous about that, but I'm like, but I need that for my family. Mm-hmm. So we're doing that. I missed a lot of time at the end of last year and this year with aging parent care, if you will. And I don't see that changing. Yeah. And so I still need to be able to be free enough to help them. So I can't get so bogged down in the practice that I can't. So then some of the personal things have changed. Like there's I was vice chair for our blah, blah, blah. And I've resigned that. And that was a really tough decision for me to resign. But I'm like, I can't, this year was tough with that. And it's not fair to my family. It's not fair to the practice. It's not fair to the board. So I've already thought about making some of those changes for next year. And potentially then, the question, I guess, would be, am I going to be bitter about that, sacrificing those things? But I think I've finally reached a point where I'm like, no, I think I'm solid in this.
Yeah. And thankfully it's a decision for now. It's not a decision forever.
But I don't know that, right? Yeah. Like some of these things, it's like, if you pass on it once,
right?
Will somebody ever ask you again? Blah, 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 blah. So it could be, this could be it. But I'm very happy with I'm very content with the decision I've made. And I hope I'm sitting here at this time next year when you're berating me with all these questions that I'm still content and don't feel like I took the brunt of the sacrifices for all the rest of this. But at least for now, I think it's what I've got to do, and let's see where we end up.
Yeah. I love it. Those are some of the questions. And to be fair to Dr. Kuba, I asked 4 or 5 out of probably 25 questions on this document.
My God. Okay.
So it's understandable that you've thrown in the towel on this a few times in the past, but I will list several of these questions on the show notes so that people can hopefully begin to ask these. I do think slowing down thinking, that's one of the things that I feel like with you in particular, just throughout the year, you tend to kind of vacillate between what you want or what you don't want. You're reevaluating pretty consistently, which is why I like this idea of towards the end of the year, just slowing it down and pausing and going, okay, are we on the path that you want to be on? And there's no right or wrong path. I think that's what's really important about all of this is these are all individualized responses, and there's no one size fits all when it comes to a practice, when it comes to a career. To me, I've always said practice owners should develop the ability to have the life that they want because they are practice owners. And it shouldn't be the opposite where, oh my gosh, I can't have this life because of this practice. And I think you're one of the people that I think has done this really well, is that you've figured out a way that this practice works for you, but it also works for your family and the obligations that you have outside of the practice. And I think that's been a lot of intentional thought that's gone into that.
So may I propose, if you will, or if you could, some of the, perhaps a few weeks ago when we were talking about the other, I know Dr. Smith comes to mind, there were 2 other practices you talked about in the authentic one. Could you target any of those 3, like to answer the next 5 questions and then the next 5 after that?
Can.
That's what I would do. Smith, you're up, dude. You're welcome. But I think it would be good.
I think so too. I feel like, again, getting a variety of these questions and starting the process of evaluating them is going to be helpful for anybody.
I want to hear from Mar. Do you remember Mar once gave us a blurb a long time ago, I think season 1?
I can get Mar on here.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Sorry, Karina.
Sorry, not sorry. I heard that evil laugh.
Yes.
You're
But I
wanting
want to hear from her. I want to hear from her.
to torture others with these questions.
It's not torture. It's important, and I think I could glean much from somebody else's perspective. So.
Yes, I think that's a great suggestion. So stay tuned for more annual retreat questions from other people.
Thanks for joining the conversation today. We hope that you are comforted in knowing that you are not alone, but we also hope that you're walking away with some really great tips and tricks to try in your practice. We value your feedback, so please take a few moments to rate and review the podcast. Finally, we want to make sure that we're covering the topics that matter to you. So track us down on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and let us know what topics you want us to cover. As always, please know that we are rooting for you today as you manage your dental drama.